Well, VSAE is the Virginia Society of Association Executives. We were founded in 1949. Currently have about 400 plus members, 200 plus of which are association executives here in primarily in the Richmond area of Virginia, here in the capital, because historically we've represented all the state-based associations. So the Virginia Association of blank, fill in the blank. But we continue to grow to add a lot of the national associations that are finding their homes in Richmond and the areas of Northern Virginia as well. We really do two big things. One, we provide education for our members. Many of our members are CAEs, Certified Association Executives. So they look to VSAE as an approved provider to give them the education that they require, the hours they need to either get or maintain that certification. And the second piece we do is really providing the networking element for our industry, building the community. It probably really helps to tell a little bit of a story with that, with our recent rebranding to kind of explain that piece. So I would say 5 or 6 years ago, the organization took a good hard look at itself and really began to change who it was as an organization. There was a bit of a knock, if you will, that it might have become an old boys network, or at least it was perceived that way. So the board and the leadership really took a good hard look and made a couple big changes to really stay ahead of some of the common generational changes they saw within the industry, and just some of the changes in general within our society. They really made a more inclusive culture within the organization and focused on more vertical growth. So whereas maybe VSAE of 30 or 40 years ago would have just captured the chief staff executives from Virginia associations, a few years ago, we really made an effort to capture all the executives within the organization, the meeting planners, the communications managers, the membership folks. So we really focused on vertical growth throughout the organization. So we changed who we were as an organization. And then about 2 years ago, we said, okay, well, now it's time to change the logo, the look and the feel to match that. And part of that involved going through a bit of a revisioning process, where we looked at, who we were as an organization, identified a focus on our primary membership, executive members, and came up with a new logo that really exemplified who we were as an organization. And this was, now we have this colorful logo with 7 different colors in it. And these 7 different colors represent the diversity of our members. And when they come together, VSAE exists in the white space in between. So we're the glue that connects the community. We're the ones who put on the content or put on the networking so our members can learn from each other. So it's really kind of exciting, but I think that story does a really good job of telling a little bit about who we are. So how did I get here? Well, I worked for an association in Washington, D.C., the Propane Education and Research Council, for about 7 years. Got my start there as a lowly grad student needing a job. Worked my way up through the ranks. And I grew up here in Richmond, Virginia, so family was looking to move back home, so to speak, and so I found an opportunity to come work for an AMC here in Virginia and work with the Virginia Propane Gas Association, as well as some other associations at that particular AMC. So in April of 2012, moved back to Richmond to take that gig. And pretty quickly, when you talk about milestones, I always like to say that failure is not a bad thing. And if you can point to some key failures in your association career, I think, and they're learning opportunities, and you really look at them as learning opportunities, I think they can be monumental to your own growth. And personally, I had a pretty big one there pretty soon, and learned some great lessons about managing expectations, about working with the board, how to communicate with your team back in the office, and never overpromise and underdeliver. So moving forward, then after a few years there, the opportunity came to come and work for Rick Eisman at Eisman Associates, notably with the Virginia Society of Association Executives, VSAE. It's about a 20-year partnership now between ENA and VSAE. So for me, it was an opportunity of a lifetime because I'm a bit of an association geek. So getting to do that and working with an SAE was an opportunity I just couldn't pass up. And to be Rick's right-hand guy, so to speak. So came on board in January of 2014 and quickly got up to speed. And then in May of this year, so May of 2015, as we were rolling out our new logo, a new website, a new AMS, we announced to our membership that in January of 2016, I will become the Executive Vice President of VSA, and Rick will hand that mantra over to me. So a lot of change, but that's kind of how I got here and a little bit about who VSAE is. If I start to think about kind of, okay, now we've made the announcement, now, you know, I've got this time to prepare to step into the CEO role. How am I going to get there? How to get from point A to point B? So I'm a planner, I'm a details person, or I should say I'm a planner organizer, type A type. So I kind of dove in and said, okay, how do I get there? So the first thing I did was find someone who was experienced, who's smarter than me, and who does executive coaching. And candidly, I reached out to her and said, hey, here's what's going on. Can we work together, meet monthly or what have you, and can I just basically engage you as an executive coach and work through this transition together? You know, she said absolutely. And so we began a coaching relationship, and that was probably one of the biggest, most fruitful steps I've taken so far. She and I, we meet monthly. It's never in the office. We always try and get out and have a cup of coffee or a meal or something. And really, the conversation has run the gamut. Sometimes if I'm coming up on a big decision point or something has happened in the organization, I might shoot her a note and say, hey, here's what I'm wrestling with. Can we kind of tackle this? And what I love about working with her is, you know, sometimes you go into those relationships thinking, okay, well, here's the answer person. I just ask the question, she'll give me the answer, and I'll learn it for next time. But it's not like that at all. It's much more questions, and, you know, I don't even call it the questioning method or whatever the terminology is, but as I'm wrestling with these things, she's asking me questions about my decision-making or the facts and how the information presents itself. So in the end, I'm not getting answers. I'm getting questions and coming up with the answers. But having that executive coach to work through that decision points, looking at my skill set and my competencies to go, okay, well, we need to grow here. We need to nurture here. Let's work on this piece has been huge. And we went through a book, Crucial Conversations by Granny Patterson and McMillan, and we probably worked through that for a good 6 months, just talking about the skill sets there, about, you know, how to communicate and people. So that's been a huge piece for me. Two, the uniqueness of our transition is that, you know, we like the kid, Rick Eisman, the current CEO with VSAE, is only 20 feet away. So, you know, it's a good thing and a bad thing, I guess. But the good part about that is I can constantly be in his office through the transition to go, well, here's how I'm handling this, or here's how I might handle this. How would you handle this? Again, on those key decision points, and kind of talk this out and have those conversations to, well, I would do X, and here's why. Or you might think about Y, and here's why. So having that 20 feet away through this transition has been huge. And then meeting with key members within the membership, the board. One of the key pieces we did very early on was I went and had one-on-one meetings with each member of the board to kind of just sit down and pick their brain. I mean, here's the leadership I'm going to be working with. So what can I learn from their experience? Candidly, what kind of tips can they give me for their own experiences? And that's been huge as well. I've got a lot of notes all over the place from those conversations. And then I've also engaged, and again, this is a relationship with VSAE, but I've put together, I don't know what you want to call it, maybe a kitchen cabinet or an unofficial advisory committee of past presidents of the organization who are no longer in official leadership capacities. And this is a group, candidly, we'll be meeting for the first time later next month. But this is a group, again, that can just kind of work to build that relationship piece, understand, hey, this decision was made 10 years ago, and that's why, A, we're seeing this now, or, might influence how this decision is made today or tomorrow. And then the last thing is I've asked questions, and there are probably people who are like, oh, goodness, here comes Brandon again with another question. But I've asked just questions of everyone. Simple things like, well, what do you see as the greatest challenge for VSAE? What do you see we're doing really well? What are we not doing so well? Members, non-members, all members of our organization, from the associate side to some of our smaller membership comp members, folks who maybe never been a member but have been connected to the organization for many years. And again, just understanding, I guess, the context of the organization. And then I've read every book I can get my hands on. There's 2 books currently in my briefcase that I'm currently working through that have been huge. One is brand new out there, but it's just simply called The New CEO's Guide. Beth Brooks has written that, and it's awesome. It's got tactical, it's got to-dos. It's very good for someone taking over the helm of an association. You can Google and get tons of resources out there about being a CEO, but having stuff that's really specific to association, that hit the nail on the head with that book. So I've had that in my bag, working through it, notes, highlighting. And the other one is a little bit different, but it's a book called Lead Like Jesus by Ken Blanchard and Phil Hodges. Both important to me, and the other side of being a CEO, other than tactical, knowing what you're doing, is the people piece. How to relate to people, how to get, you can't lead if no one's following you. And I just thought that book, who I'm actually working with with another colleague, so kind of a peer mentor, has been huge for the people piece of stepping into the role and just learning those people skills and applying those people skills. And then 2 other books which have been huge. Well, I already mentioned Crucial Conversations, but Good to Great by Jim Collins, which I know he's written a follow-on. He actually has I don't know if you call it a monograph or a small book where he took the good to great for kind of the for-profit world and said, okay, well, here's how I think it would apply to the nonprofit world. That's always on my bookshelf. Whenever everyone asks, well, give me a good book to read, I always point that one out. And I use that as a reference. And then throughout my career, not just stepping into the CEO role, but throughout my career, mentors have been huge. I've had some official mentors over the years, and I always think it's good to do both what I'll call internal mentor when you have an organization size that will allow it, and an external one. Because sometimes there's stuff that you can't talk internally with. You need an outside objective third party. So I've had some key mentors there. And then there's been these unofficial mentors. I can think of one person in particular who I worked for a few years ago, and he and I have never used the term mentor, but I absolutely look at him as a mentor in my career. And so I think that's been key to have those relationships. And if you want to step in the CEO role, if you don't have a mentor, stop, get one right now. Internal, external, it doesn't matter. But having some of those unofficial mentors. And then after that, there's peer mentors. And I have several folks that I get together with and from call call on from time to time. Actually wrote in the VSAE newsletter last month about the importance of a quote-unquote beer summit. And this really came out of my experience this past summer at ASE's annual conference. And it was one of those evenings where I was with some colleagues and peers, and we'd ended up at a local brewery, and we're just sitting around enjoying a beer, and realized real quickly that we're getting in some really in-depth conversation. Well, here's what I'm struggling with. How have you handled that, or how would you do that? And it just became one of those, quote-unquote Vegas conversations where you're digging into some deep meat. And, the fact that it happened at a brewery wasn't a bad side benefit, I should say. But having those peers that you can reach out to who are in similar situations, as unofficial mentors. And then, kind of in the realm of mentors, there's kind of the fourth leg of the stool or chair, so to speak. But every CEO that I've ever worked for, I've learned tremendously for. And what's interesting sometimes, and this may be my own fault, sometimes I don't realize then what I'm learning, but then when I make a transition and kind of look back on it, I go, oh, I see how he handled that. Makes a lot of sense to me. But I think of all the CEOs I've had the privilege to serve under, and have each learned a tremendous amount from each of them over the years. And so I think that's kind of informed my journey. So it's a little bit of a kind of what kind of key steps I've taken in my journey, and things I would recommend for those who are aspiring to, or maybe stepping into, or already have stepped into the CEO role.